Danny Kanell? Yes! It's a nothing personal. Samson, sit down. And I've been trying to get Danny Kanell on the show from the beginning of Nothing Personal, but I wanted to do it in person because we used to work together in person, and we got him. Danny Kanell is here with us. Hi, Danny.
How are you? I would like to take some credit for your success, right? I mean, when you were just getting into broadcasting, I was kind of just starting at CBS Sports HQ, and so we have you on to be our baseball expert. So I feel like I deserve some credit, right? Like a sliver of it.
More than a sliver, because our mornings with Kanell and Bell, when you have me in, I mean, you and Coca. By the way, you
owe me a lot.
To Coca.
Yes, so more than a sliver. I feel like I should be getting a percentage of the royalties.
Let's not get crazy.
All right.
I mean, let's sort of ease up.
All right.
You're 2 minutes into your first time as a guest. Don't ask for equity that fast.
All right.
But it is true that you introduced me to Matthew Coca.
That's right. Coca was us. You stole him from us. You took him. He's a great. Coca's the best. He's awesome. We were talking a little bit on before the show, how he tells you what you need to hear. It can be a little bit abrasive sometimes, but that's what a producer's job is to do, is to give you feedback and criticism, and he does a good job of that.
Do you have anyone in your life, and I want to get through, for people who don't understand Kanell, forget pro football player, forget major voice in the media, forget all the success you've had on and off the field. Very outspoken in terms of your love of college football and your views of things. And I want to get to all of it. But I want to start with your view of college sports and my issue with it, because we've covered a lot of Nothing Personal. College sports is now professional sports. Mm-hmm. There's free agency. That's all the transfer portal is. That's all NIL is. And how have you experienced that when you've wanted something, you've thought about it? Has reality been disappointing to you?
It has. So college football in the last 4 years, because the NIL laws went into effect in 2021, which also coincided with the transfer portal being pretty much unrestricted completely. It used to be if you sat out, if you wanted to transfer, you had to sit out a year. So those two collided at this perfect point, especially if you're a player, in history 4 years ago. And so now we have seen in the last 4 years, I think, more change in the college athletics landscape than in the previous 100 years. Coinciding with the conference realignment, massive movements. I mean, we saw the Pac-12 die, essentially. The conference has been around 100 years, full of tradition, full of rivalries, full of championships, and it's been blown up. Then we've got free agency, as you mentioned. Not like it is in baseball or in football, where it's you sign a 3 or 4 year deal. It is every single year players are dipping their toes in the water saying, let me test the market, whether they actually do it above board, entering the portal, or whether it's back channeling those conversations.
It's my dream to have free agency every year, because then you're getting paid for how you perform, actually.
Yes, that's a pretty good situation. I like that aspect of it. I think there are some problems with it that are getting addressed as we speak. There is no better time from a financial standpoint to be a college football or basketball player. There's no better time, because you can maximize your earning potential every single time. And I guess from a owner's perspective, or the school's perspective, or a collective's perspective, they can get out of deals if they don't like players. And you're seeing essentially what I think is an organic minor league system. In minor league baseball, you see a player get drafted. There's some differences, obviously. You don't get to choose in baseball where you get drafted by. But if you're drafted and you're a first-round pick, let's just equivalent. Well, the equivalent would be a 5-star quarterback, right? And we've seen 5-star guys start in AAA, right? They might start at a Georgia or Ohio State or a Florida State. And if they're good, it's great. They can test free agency, get paid again. But if they're not good, what happens to them? They get sent down.
Wait, are you saying Ohio State is the equivalent of AAA?
Yes.
In college?
Yes.
Explain that to me.
Michigan, too. Michigan, I would say the top.
Who's major leagues?
NFL. So
the
NFL is major league. So because that's the same way baseball, major league.
Got
so
you.
The minor league system is all of college football. AAA would be SEC, Big Ten, maybe Power 4. AA is like lower tier of the Power 4. Group of 5 would be, AA, and then you got FCS as single A.
But you can't get to the NFL straight out of high school. In baseball, you can get to the big leagues pretty quickly out of high school if you're one of the best. But what's the youngest NFL player there is right now?
probably 20
I
years
don't think
old.
there's a teenager playing in the
No,
NFL.
no, because of the rules that's been collectively bargained by the players in the NFL and with the NFL itself, where you do have to go to college for 3 years. And in baseball, you can even go just for 2 years to college if you go to JUCO, you go junior college route.
go
you
to
can come
1
out.
year.
Yeah, so you could, you don't have to do that. So I think some of those rules, I would actually, believe it or not, and this is where I think I am proud of myself for evolving to a place where I used to be against paying the players. I did not like the movement that was taking place, in large part because some of the language that was used I thought was way over the top to make a point, which is what we do in every subject matter
what we
that we
do
have.
for a living,
Yeah,
by the way.
right. But there were people that saying, college players were equivalent to slavery. And that really bothered me because they were saying it was slave wages and it was free labor, all things that were true. But from my experience as a college player, I felt you lived like royalty on campus, which was a great existence. And I would guess that probably 90 to 95% of scholarship athletes, talking about soccer, tennis, women's sports, baseball players that were on full scholarships were more than happy to say, yeah, go ahead, take advantage of me. I'll give you that free labor. Go ahead and, just give me a free tuition and room and board, and I'm happy with that. And that was kind of the way I felt as well.
But are you coming from privilege, though? Where you
Yes,
didn't have
absolutely.
to bring money back to your family?
Absolutely.
And I think the argument, and I may be on your side on this, however, the other side, just to present it, is that you have to give the ability for people to earn a wage if they have a skill that someone else will pay for, and you've got to let them do it as early as possible.
Correct. And so then, I think I was way ahead of the NCAA, who still is behind this ball, realizing that the court system was going to force their hand anyway. And so then NIL was going to be this compromise because it was, all right, we can't prohibit them from making money if they have built a brand. And I was like, you know what? That makes a ton of sense. Tim Tebow, when he wins it and he still has another year at Florida, why wouldn't he be able to go sign autographs for $100,000, whatever the number is? Johnny Manziel, why couldn't he have a car company put rims on his car and do whatever and make whatever kind of money he can off the field in a true marketing sense? So I thought, you know what? That's right. Why should we prohibit people from doing that? And that's why I got on board with NIL. Then quickly, schools realized, wait a second, this is a major loophole where, we'll call it NIL, but it took months, not years, months, for collectives to realize we're just going to pay the players, and we'll have this kind of joke of a setup where we'll pay a kid to endorse, be the
local
brand.
car company?
Yeah, the local car company, even worse,
One of
which is
my
I think is
favorites.
shadier, some charities. Because then you get the benefit from the donors that want to give to the school of a 501c3 write-off, and then you're funneling the money.
That loophole's been closed.
Yes,
That's a bad
exactly.
one.
There is some really
Fraud.
shady stuff that has gone on to get around these. And now, we're getting to a point with this settlement case between the House and the NCAA where, and it's still, there's a lot that needs to be ironed out, but where the schools are actually going to be paying the players themselves, and it's not going to be such a sham. But although it still is a sham because they're still not calling them employees, which they always have been. But the NCAA and the schools and the university presidents don't want to do that because they still like to have their cake and eat it too.
Well, it's a legal issue.
Yes.
They'd have to have a bunch of rights. They'd have to have the right to unionize, and we saw that Dartmouth got that right, but they have since run from that, by the way. That it turns out that it's a lot of squeeze and not much juice. And so what the players really are hoping with this settlement is they have the right to earn the maximum amount that their employer will pay them.
Right.
And I'm all in because we all want that as employees. Mm-hmm. We want the ability to earn as much as possible. The problem that I'm thinking about with these is that they're kids, and that the NFL is a carrot of guaranteed money that people were working toward, but very hard to get. Now players are getting paid who are really not all that good, and you're going to have programs go bankrupt. And so what I'm wondering is, are you thinking about that step where we are 5 years away not from having, what's the number, Coca? Is it 130 FBS schools? Is it
133.
133?
Yep.
That there's no way that 133 schools will be able to run a football program.
Going back to old school Danny, who was against paying the players, because I've come full circle where, all right, if there's this much money, because I always push back, said, are we sure there's that much money to pay the players? And reminding people that, you know what, if you're going to pay the football players and they're not going to be employees, you need to pay the women's basketball players, you need to pay the baseball players, softball players, soccer players, so that there's Title IX implications that take place. So it was like, are we sure there's enough money for everybody? Then you see the latest TV contract numbers, which this last round, there clearly is enough money. And we're starting to see money come in from the collectives where, okay, there is so much money. When you start seeing coaches getting paid, Jimbo Fisher got $67 million not to coach. That was his buyout.
But so I can give you an athletic program that loses money. I can play with the books in a way that I can
and that's
show
what they've done.
Right, so that's coming out, and that's all for the purpose of setting up the stage to not pay the players the maximum amount.
Exactly. But I do think that all is going to come above board because I cannot recall one case that the NCAA has fought and won or even tied. Like they have been smoked in the courts. When you see, I think it was Brett Kavanaugh, who, when they had the original the case before the courts,
Supreme Court Justice
Brett Kavanaugh said, this is the worst monopoly we have ever seen. What other workforce can you not pay your labor? I mean, he put the hammer down on the NCAA, and since then it has been a free-for-all, and people are going out there exposing the weaknesses in the legal arguments and showing that it really has been taking advantage of the players.
But the problem is where that ends, and you've started to see with the Super League, where the talk of the conference commissioners getting together and saying, we want way more power. And then you're seeing arguments within conferences about allocations of broadcast revenue or of conference revenue for CFP success, where people are jealous of Notre Dame. But the next step...
Me included.
What? Wait, you're jealous because
they can do it and nobody they get away with it. No one has called them out.
What are they getting away with? Wait, tell me what you mean.
So Notre Dame is independent, obviously.
Right.
You know that.
Football is.
Yes, football is. Yes, they're in their ACC. So I'm an ACC guy, so I would love to have them in the ACC as a full football everything member. But they have 1 foot in the door, 1 foot out the door, and most importantly, when they go to the national championship game, they get $20 million all to themselves, hoarded all to themselves, where Ohio State, who they played and won, only got $1.1 million because the $20 million they got was for the Big Ten. It was allocated they had to split it with the entire conference. Notre Dame being an independent, they've hacked the system because they figured out, we're Notre Dame, we don't have to join a conference. We've already got this pseudo agreement with the ACC so we can enjoy the benefits of basketball and baseball and soccer and lacrosse. But in football, we get to have our cake and eat it too, because when the commissioners got together, they allowed them access to the college football playoff. That was where I thought they could have drawn the line and said, you know what, you guys can be independent, you can have your own TV contracts, but you can't take a part of our college football playoff.
You just said something, though, that you can't gloss over. They were able to do an independent TV deal.
Yes.
They were able to negotiate and get money, and I'm not sure out of the 133 FBS schools, how many of them, because I think they would if they could, could go to a network, and now there's a lot more choices, but in terms of cashing in the way Notre Dame has, how many are able to do that? Is your alma mater able to cut its own TV deal?
No, or else they would have.
That's the end of the story.
And it was interesting because you asked about, are you worried about the sport going bankrupt? I worry about individual programs going bankrupt, which is one of the reasons Florida State was trying to sue to get out of the ACC, because the television deal was a fraction of what the SEC and Big Ten was getting. So with the revenue share that's now taking place and with the TV money that's taken place that's coming into those SEC and Big Ten programs, Florida State is getting half of what Florida,
Well, they just negotiated this, though.
They
just
did,
negotiated to get a bigger piece.
They did, but I don't know if the piece is still... I think it'll be better, but the reason, and this is all part of the negotiation, this is why Florida State and Clemson sued, was to have this happen so they weren't going to be on par with Wake Forest or Boston College, who, no offense to those schools, they just don't bring the eyeballs, because it is about eyeballs, who's watching your product. Right.
They're not big.
And they know that too. And they fought this until they looked at what happened to the Pac-12 and watched what happened to Washington State and Oregon State. They're like, we don't want to be those schools. So I guess we'll make a sacrifice. We'll let Florida State, Clemson, Miami, the bigger brands in the ACC take home more of that pay. But the very real concern from Florida State's perspective was they were at a $40 million deficit compared to the SEC teams and the Big Ten teams on an annual basis. And the ACC's locked in for 10 more years plus to this ACC deal. So you do that. They
just did an extension.
Yeah. So they till 2036. So that's $40 million deficit you're having to make up to pay your players, to go to your boosters and make up for that deficit. There already is booster fatigue and donation fatigue from people that are like, all right, I just cut a check, whether it's a big donor who donates $100,000, $1 million, or it's the guy that's $100 a month. It's like, you know what? I've been giving my $100 a month and we still stink. Or I thought we were
because
gonna,
you went 2-10 that's where the fatigue comes from.
No. I'm saying Florida State is one example. I think there's donor fatigue at a place like Texas A&M, where a fan's probably like, wait a second, I was given all that money and we spent $67 million just to fire the coach, and we still are 8-4. Like, we still don't have the success we're looking for. I think there's a lot of donor, or you had. You helped pitch in to keep a certain 5-star or a certain player in the transfer portal, and that player didn't pan out. They're probably like, man, do I really want to give again? Like, to that.
Can I tell you why I'm laughing? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but season ticket holders are very much like this. And you have to know this and have experience with it. Only one team wins at the end of a year. In baseball, 29 losers. In the NFL, 31 losers. And when your season ticket renewal comes up, you're looking at all sorts of different factors. Do I have fun? Is it enjoyable to be at the game? Do I have a chance of winning? Do I use this for business or family? The people donating to programs, you think 1-2-10 season is a fatigue causer, or 1-8-4? I gave all this money. I'm A&M, and now I'm despondent. So now I'm done, because those are the type of supporters and boosters that you can't build a business on. You need the people to be there when you're 2-10 and when you're 8-4 and a disappointment.
To your point, Ohio State, the minute Michigan won their national title a year ago, Ohio State sent out an email to their entire alumni base that said, we need your help. Are you we're basically tired of watching Michigan beat us 3 times in a row, now 4. We need your help to compete with them, to compete with everybody else. And guess what? They raised enough money instantly from that campaign, based off of a season that fell low, short of expectations.
Right.
Again, they raised the money to have one of the most expensive rosters.
Why didn't they do it the year before?
They should have.
They lost 3 years in a row.
They should maybe after year 1. They have. But that was like the straw that broke the camel's back.
But
so
can
there's
you do it
definitely
again?
examples.
So
That's
how
a
often?
great question.
How often can you go to the well? I like going to the well every year with season ticket holders or with people who give money to charity. You make it a part of your annual sort of habit.
And well, now schools, it's funny you mentioned season ticket holders, because instead of going and asking your booster base for just flat out donations, now they're just taxing you on the season ticket sales. They're building in a percentage. They're tag on an extra $20, and they might even call it. There's like a name for some of these fees that they have. Talent retention fee,
player acquisition
fee, whatever it is. So
we never had the guts. We love it. It's fantastic, but it happens in every industry. So we should know that when the cost of fuel goes up because of things that are going on beyond our control, and the cost of oil changes the cost of fuel, and then an airplane company, an airline, will put a fuel surcharge in, or a rental car company will have a line item of a fuel surcharge. And there's nothing you can do about it. And so what schools are doing now is they're putting in, hey, we're not going to change our P&L because we have to pay this cornerback. Forget it. You're going to pay for it.
Right.
And that happens across all industry.
Yep.
So I'm not at all surprised that it happens.
Right. Again, you're seeing the very natural evolution into college football becoming professional football. It's minor league NFL, and I think that's just the latest example.
Do you think that with player movement, I was thinking about Ohio State, didn't one of their players, like a freshman, they won the title and then he was offered a huge
Jeremiah
amount?
Smith, who's probably the best wide receiver we've seen as a true freshman, I don't know, in the past 20 years maybe. I mean, he was phenomenal. And there were reports out there.
Does that bother you, or does it make you happy?
That he was offered?
Yes.
So here's what I don't believe the numbers. That was the reports that were out there. See, there's some very shady things that are taking on from the media, where they're getting fed information from agents who are playing.
Never.
No, right? They are absolutely trying to play the game, and they are working over different administrations and athletic departments and collectives by floating these numbers, which are completely fake and outrageous and inflated. They're trying to drive up the market. So $4.5 million was the number that Jeremiah Smith was supposedly offered. And when you read the reports from reporters, they'll say believed to be. They'll say, I'm hearing. There's never a concrete offer. Even after the deals, I don't believe the money that Carson Beck got to go to Miami, which have been, again, believed to be this number. I wish there was a system where it was like the NFL. I knew every player's salary. I could go look it up in a database and say.
Well, the union leaks it all.
Exactly.
It gets every
it's public
MLB
knowledge
salary.
so that you know exactly what your market is. I would rather have that than what I feel is a market where players feel like they're constantly underpaid because they're hearing these numbers floated and they're not accurate. I mean, I've talked to multiple coaches who are like, these numbers are nowhere near what they're reporting. Talk to somebody that is very close
on the
with
low
the
end.
collective.
What's the
numbers are on the high end. They're overinflated.
So the rumor is 4.5 to 5 million for Jeremiah
and I think
Smith.
it's probably realistically 2.5 a year. Now, again, if they would have said 4.5 over 2 years, I would have said, yeah, I believe that. But it was 1 year because they're 1 year deals that are taking place. The other thing why these agents are they're like pigs in slop right now. The agents that are representing these kids.
Is that a good thing?
No,
I don't know. I'm Jewish.
No,
What's that reference?
They're just playing in the mud, like just getting dirty and loving it. Because are you aware what the agents are taking from these players, these college football players who historically?
I would assume 20% when you're supposed to only take 10 or 5.
So do you
what
know,
did you pay your agent?
There is an NFLPA mandate that you cannot take. It used to be 4% was the max that an agent can take. It's down to 3, and it might even be down to 2, but it's definitely been 3 the last time I checked. 3% was the max you were allowed an agent could charge you. They're taking 20%, and I've even heard 30% of some of these fees.
They're like Busconis. Do you know what a Busconi is in the Dominican?
No.
They have all these young international players who are 16 years old.
Right.
And they basically just steal from them. They take 50% of their future MLB earnings. It's a nightmare.
And that's one where the same crowd that was always these players being exploited, they've been treating like slaves, they've been silent on this. Like, I want them to make this public to put some pressure. And it is one of the reasons why you probably do need a union. You need somebody that's speaking on behalf, protecting the players from some of their rights and from some of the shark-like, figures that are coming around. Because if you're a 17-year-old who, in your lifetime, when you were 10, 11 years old, you never thought it was possible to get paid in college. Now all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can get paid a few $100,000. You're not paying attention to what's coming out of that check.
I'm interested in this whole union situation because you're right. Unions are meant to protect labor and protect laborers. And athletes query, are they a class of people we want to protect? It's never been thought of that way by me because I've always viewed athletes as not vagrant migrant workers working for minimum wage. These are the minimum in baseball is $800,000. I mean, that is a number that the majority of people won't make in their lifetime, and they're making it in 1 year. And when you're unionizing, there is a problem with length of service. And so in college, you'd have a player who'd be a part of the union, and they would then leave to become a pro. What I want to propose to you is that there's one union that covers the pro players and college players. And therefore, they all get taken in. And if you're out of the game, you're out of the game, and you're not fully vested the same way it is as a pro, where you don't get your 10 years of service. But either way, you're covered from a young age.
That would be the easiest, simplest solution.
And
would
baseball
be for the
did
NFL,
it with its minor leaguers.
Which would be great, although haven't a lot of minor league programs gone away?
So,
because of that?
I love where your head's at.
Right.
You can't have everything.
Right.
And I'm thinking about your pig and slop situation.
Right.
Do they get everything they want, pigs and slop? Or do they eventually end up as bacon?
They eventually get pigs get slaughtered.
So this is it.
Right.
And so if you want to unionize, you're going to be subject to collective bargaining. You're going to be subject to the power that management has over labor. Because when you are a player, definitionally, you're at a disadvantage because you're getting older. Owners are going to own the team for way longer than your career is going to be.
Right.
And people miss that all the time. That's why owners win negotiations.
No
and
doubt.
Football is no
Do you
exception.
know what's another really interesting aspect? Because there's differences in obviously college, the way we've known it, and minor league baseball. You've had guys that played how long in the minor leagues? 10 plus years, 15 sometimes?
You can do it as long as you want. Bull Durham.
And now we've seen at the University of Miami a tight end who played 9 years. And I still don't understand the math on it. I don't know how many ACL injuries you have to have. COVID helped a bunch of players, a bunch of 6-year players. Dylan Gabriel was the quarterback. Bo Nix before him. They both played 6 years of college football. At what point do you say enough is enough? And they're talking about going to 5 years, where you just get a scholarship for 5 years, and you can have a red shirt in there. It's just 5 years is it. But at what point does a player fight it and say, wait a second, you're restricting my earning capabilities? Like, what? It's America, right? This is what. How can you say I can only work in this market for this amount of time? Like
you can go to the CFL. There's a bunch of leagues, UFL, XFL.
Right.
If you want to be paid to play football, the market will dictate, because the guys who are in college, I actually don't know this. You're the perfect person to ask. If you're in college playing for 5, 8, 9 years, isn't that because you're not good enough to be paid by the NFL?
Yes, but so the reason, like the minor league that's 15 years, he's probably making nothing, right? I mean, he's
20 grand a month.
Right.
For 6 months.
Right.
But he's doing it for the love of the game.
So Dylan Gabriel's a good example. He would be better suited to play another year at Oregon and try to run it back, because they'd probably pay him 7 figures. In the NFL, he's probably going to be a 5th round pick, maybe 6th round pick. He's probably out of the NFL in 2 or 3 years. He would be way better suited playing in college football. And then think about it, if he could still go if there was nothing saying kick him out, as long as Oregon was like, hey, he's great for us, he can win. It's better than breaking in a freshman who hasn't never played. They have a guy named Dante Moore who may be good. And I'm not advocating for that, but I do wonder if that's the road we're headed, because players, and it's benefited a lot of players to stay. They've made more money in college than turning pro.
Very few, though. I mean, you're talking about
Carson Beck's a good example.
But that is a great
Jalen
example.
Milroe's another one who's trying to do the NFL, and he'll be an interesting case study to see where he gets drafted if he could have made more money staying in college. Because if it's just a financial decision, for some of these players, it's a no-brainer to stay longer in college.
So Caitlin Clark, I believe, would have made more money had she stayed in Iowa
Agreed.
the extra year.
Yes.
But she wanted to get her pro career started, and it has changed her life in terms of the opportunities available to her, in terms of what's happened in Indiana. But Caitlin Clark, to me, is the exception, not the rule. People will act in their self-interest. Mm-hmm. If the quarterback would be better off being in Oregon, in theory, his agent, his advisor would say, this is what you should do for your future finances.
Right.
So I have to believe that they did the math on getting the minimum in the NFL, the likelihood of being in the NFL, and you brought up a stat.
Well, Dylan Gabriel had to go. So his what do you call it? His eligibility is up. He's done his 6 years.
We'll edit that out.
So,
no one will know you paused.
No. So that's fine. No, I don't mind. I've been hitting the head a lot. But Quinn Ewers is somebody who does have another year from Texas. From Texas, he could have stayed in college, and there, again, rumored numbers were $6 million a year. They would have paid him to come. There were multiple schools that proposed money on the table for him to stay another year in college. He might. I don't think he's going to be a first-round pick. So his money's starting to be taken out of his pocket. But there's been reports that he wants to be a legacy. He grew up in the state of Texas. He doesn't want to be known as anything else but a Longhorn. Arch Manning's behind him. He doesn't want to, get benched for Arch Manning. So he's kind of going to the NFL just because, he's like, hey, all right, I'm done. When I was in college, I wanted to leave.
I thought you said you loved it.
I did. I loved it. But after 4 years, I was like, I loved Florida State. But I was ready to get to the NFL, kind of what you're talking about. And there was also the financial incentive. Like, I wanted to finally do it for a living and see, all right, can I make, good money playing a game?
Would you have kept going if you could have and you were being paid? Because you were in FSU, let's face it.
I could have made 7 figures as a starting quarterback. I would have probably stayed another year. And if I absolutely would have, if I knew I was going to be a 4th-round pick, my signing bonus was $131,000. I definitely would have stayed. Maybe
would you have left FSU if you had been offered? My Badgers are having a situation where they're angry with the Hurricanes, who are my second favorite team.
Right.
Xavier Lucas. The question is, was there a deal? Was it an illegal deal?
Right.
Was there tampering? And this is now going to be an issue with college that used to be just an issue in the pros, where everyone actually tampers.
Yep.
First of all, going back to your days when you weren't being paid, were you tampered with to ever transfer? Because no one would care because...
No, you had to sit out a year. So they were like, I don't want to wait.
the red shirt, and there's no money involved.
Right. No money involved, and it was just... I thought... So my junior year, so I stayed... I didn't redshirt. I was forced right into be a backup. I was supposed to redshirt, but they, depth chart issues. Guy got hurt. Another guy went and played baseball. So I was the backup my freshman year, so I didn't get to redshirt. Then my sophomore year, backed up Charlie Ward again. We won the national championship. Then I started my junior year. So the only time I really thought about leaving Florida State was that my first start was in Miami. Big game. It was probably my 5th or 6th start. We were undefeated. I'd played pretty well up to that point. A little shady, but we had won, and we won pretty easily. This was the first big game. Shaky.
Head injury.
Shaky, yeah, exactly.
You've been hit a lot.
So 3 interceptions in the against Miami. It was Warren Sapp. It was Ray Lewis. It was all these future NFL guys. I got worked over. I played awful. Got benched late in the game. And then, it was like, what are you going to do with Kanell? It was asked for Coach Bowden and Mark Richt, and they were like, well, we'll see him practice. He's got to earn his job back. And I remember calling my dad and talking to him like all throughout that week, like man, should I quit? I'm mad. I'm like, I can't believe they're not backing me. Like, why wouldn't they stick with me as the starter? Why? My dad's like, you're not going to leave now. He's like, stick it out, do great at practice, win back your job, and we'll deal with it after the season. If you want to leave after the season, you can. We'll address it then.
So you just said your dad. Your dad is a very famous. I've known your dad. He was our team doctor,
right,
with the Marlins, and he's someone who has helped me more than you ever have. I mean, I love him.
I don't know. I gave you coca.
That is true. That was a big one. I love your dad way more than I love you. And but I don't take your dad as the sympathetic kind of dad.
Right.
When you called him from FSU after he benched, the way that Doc Kanell is with me
right.
was get your ass out there.
Right.
Like, stop complaining.
That very much was it. Yeah. Like, you're not going to walk away from this team now. You're not going to quit now. You're going to win back your job. It was very much like, go back to work.
I love him.
Yeah. And it was. And
did you want to hear that back then? Or was he your dad? Did you know how excuse me. Did you know how famous your dad was?
Yeah, because, I was, you talk about being privileged. I got to hang out in clubhouses and locker rooms. I got to play catch with Dan Marino. He used to do Yankees spring training when they had it in Fort Lauderdale, and they would have the fantasy camps. Some of those guys like Whitey Ford were in the locker room. Don Mattingly was there when he was on the Yankees. Reggie Jackson. We're talking about legends, and I'm in the clubhouse. My dad was Big Doc, and I was Little Doc. Like, that was my nickname. So everybody just kind of knew me as Little Doc. And, like, that point, and then when I'd go around town, like, my dad would see people he had operated on. Or I would, when I started, going to a restaurant, had a reservation, to be like, oh, you're Dr. Kanell's son. Like that. So definitely there was a reputation there that thankfully, was a solid one, where he was a great doctor. And the thing that I'm proudest of my dad is that he wasn't just a great doctor to Dan Marino or Whitey Ford or the legends that he operated on.
All the scrubs that he operated on
exactly.
were better off for it.
Exactly. And he treated them the same way that he treated everybody. My dad's always taught me that. Like, make sure you treat the equipment manager the same as you treat the owner. And I think
he's Danny's father now?
Who's that?
Do you think that he's now, when he goes somewhere, hey, are you Danny Kanell's father?
He's joked about that a little bit. I think but like, as a dad, I think that makes him really proud. Like, I think he loves that, And like,
not all dads do.
Right.
So you say that,
right.
but you're right.
And we have a great relationship. We were just at dinner the other night. He's my best friend. Like, we have a great relationship, and he's, everything I believe, every core value I have is because my dad instilled them in me.
Does he like your involvement in the media and how outspoken you are on social media? Does he even know about that?
Yes, he follows me on Twitter. He follows me on X, and a couple times, and he'll
call you and say,
"Oh,
listen,
yeah,
Danny."
yeah." He will. He'll be like, "Be careful," say, "Be careful what you say," or he'll say something like that. The thing that really bothers him is if, like, I'll ask him to come on. And my dad is very soft-spoken. Like, he does not like...
And he's a very big man, by the way,
exactly. He's like a gentle giant is basically what he is. He got asked to introduce me at the Broward County Sports Hall of Fame. And he did. But I'm telling you, he was so nervous. And it was maybe one of the worst introductions you have ever heard
write it out
at
for
anyone.
Him?
No, he did it. And it was so awkward. I felt so bad for him. He did it. He, like, basically and there were a couple other ones that were just unbelievably, tributes to the person that was going to get the award. And my dad was like, this is my son,
and I love him.
Exactly. It was very, very short. And he was just like, get me out of here and let him come talk. I think he did have a joke in there that was like, he's the one that's a great talker now. I'm not. So, like, I'm out.
So you've been public for a while,
yeah.
But I view you very differently than when you were doing Kanell and Bell, very differently than when you were an NFL player or an FSU player. You've decided that you want your voice to be heard, and it can be contrarian, and it can be combative. And so you'll go at it with people who don't deserve your time. and I'd like to understand the mentality and whether or not that actually impacts your family, impacts your friends, impacts you and your mental health, because you go after it.
I think I've been tamer the last year or two. Last year I got into it with Deion's son. Not Deion Sanders, not Shedeur Sanders, not Shiloh Sanders, the one who didn't play, which bothered me the most, that he was one of the loudest and he didn't do anything except he runs around with a video. He called me a hoe out there. So I have I have a very good memory. I'll hold things. I will hold on to things. So I held it until the entire season was over. When they finished 4-8, I brought it back to him. And I didn't call out Shador probably because I didn't have an issue with them. It was really the son. And I said, does your dad let you talk with that mouth? You know, because Dion doesn't curse. Like, Dion is very, like, polished. He doesn't curse. So I got my revenge on him. Contrarian is something I think I've always been, whether it was in high school and I was talking with my buddies and we'd be arguing about a movie. I'd be like, are you sure that movie's as good as we think? You know, like, just stupid stuff like that. I've always kind of enjoyed arguing, but in a way that I think is fun. And I ask the other people, though, more so in person, because I'll
ask your daughters, though.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Did
I'm
they
contrarian with them, and they don't like it. They'll get mad at me, but I'll, like, poke and prod them kind of to test their knowledge of a subject or their thoughts on a subject or their conviction on a subject, which I like to do. I want to see where people really
But they're
stand.
never embarrassed about the public side? They never come home from high school, because I had this issue running the Marlins where my kids would get made fun of for a trade and they'd say, that's my dad.
Right.
Like, I didn't trade this player.
Right.
Like, stop.
They'll get embarrassed if I do something goofy. You know, like if I'm doing, like I did, there's a girl named Katie Feeney. She was a TikTok sensation. And she went to Penn State, still a student there. And she has like millions of TikTok followers. So we were at the Big Ten championship game and they were like, hey, do you want to do this TikTok trend, which was some dance, and it was really corny. And I was like, sure, why not?
Did you have to rehearse?
Like for 2 seconds. I probably should have rehearsed longer if you would have seen the dance, how bad it was. But I was kind of like the old dad white guy, so it kind of worked. It played well. And they were like, they weren't embarrassed. They kind of were like, oh, he's with a girl that has 8 million TikTok followers, so that was kind of cool. But then they were like, but Dad, you embarrassed yourself. So it was like this conundrum they were in where I think they were like, oh, geez, like that's our dad, like kind of one of those. The more serious things, when I was at ESPN, we had some serious like issues with death threats and stuff like that. Like you get the crazy fan. That's where my wife got, you know, a little bit more worried about, you know, more serious things that were taking place, because she'll be like, I can't believe you said that. And this was something that was I thought was pretty innocuous, was Tom Brady was playing, it was the Patriots against the Broncos in the AFC title game. And I basically said the Broncos should do everything to stop Tom Brady, including hitting him after the whistle. If they, you know, and if it costs them a couple 15-yard penalties, then so be it. Well, Patriots fans took that as I said they should injure Tom Brady, which I didn't mean at all. Like it just
Bountygate.
Yeah,
is basically
exactly.
that is what you were saying, though.
Right, to hit him and
Short
hit him
of the
hard.
money, but
you
said after the whistle.
Yeah,
that's a penalty. And you
that's
said if it's
it.
a couple 15 yards, I think
that's
you
fine.
just said
yes,
fine,
which I am okay with that.
Sounds like Bountygate to me.
No, but they were paid to injure him, to knock him out of the game.
And you're suggesting not
just getting
injury.
his head. Yeah.
Oh, so not actually hit him.
No.
I thought you said hit him.
No, hit him. Make him think about it. Make him wonder, am I going to get hit this third time?
Don't you think that
after
anyway
the
as a
whistle?
football player? Aren't you always just thinking, wow, I'm about to get hit?
But
like other than Tua, doesn't everybody else think that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think every defensive coordinator, and I just had this problem. It wasn't even me. It was a couple of my buddies on my Cover 3 podcast that were saying about Riley Leonard because of his injury history. They were saying when they played Penn State, the Penn State should hit him often. And at times, if it's a late hit, then so be it. I guarantee you every defensive coordinator is telling their players, hey, this guy's got a propensity for getting hurt. Like, let's go to the echo of the whistle, you know, without saying.
So that's pitching inside for a guy who crowds the plate. Just
exactly.
FYI.
Yes.
But we don't say throw at their head.
Exactly.
So, but hold on.
No, it's exactly
which?
the same thing.
So when you're suggesting
throw it inside,
hitting, so throwing inside is actually a strategy used.
But what if you miss? What if you're going inside and it just gets away from you?
Do defenders, can you miss to the head and when you were aiming for the chest?
Nowadays, they can't afford to do
Because
any
I'm
of
not buying it. Pitchers have great command. They're lying to you when they say that they're not aiming for something. They are.
Right.
They can hit it.
Now, so I don't think anybody goes for the head hunting shot anymore. Like, I don't think the head hunting, I'm going to knock this guy out with a concussion. I think that's been eradicated from the game by the most part. And if it is, that player gets multi-game suspension. Mm-hmm. He's done. His reputation is kind of out there. Where I do think there's a lot of inadvertent targeting that takes place because the ball carrier oftentimes protects himself, goes down. So there's still a lot that needs to be addressed with the targeting calls, in my opinion, where I do think they should bring in more subjectivity to it. Instead of just saying, well, look at the crown of the helmet and they put it in super slow-mo. If you did that on every single play, there you could call targeting. You know how they say it about holding. You could call holding on every play.
There is holding every play.
Exactly. You could probably say the same for targeting if you took a look at every collision that took place. So I do think they should give some room for some subjectivity. Say, all right, this player intended to injure or go above the head and neck area where it was something that crossed the line.
I think the concussion settlement ruined any thought of
Correct.
giving any possible interpretation
Yes.
by any referee.
Correct.
It
Right.
had to be, listen,
Right.
we just paid a lot of money. I don't care what your thought is. We're going to be consequentialists on this.
Right.
We're not going to look to your motive. You hit him in the head, it's going to be a penalty.
Yep. Do you think the NFL is rigged?
No.
All right, good.
It's
Because I was
absurd.
curious. It
That's
is absurd.
literally absurd.
But I do think
if it
like,
were, wouldn't you think the Cowboys would have done better in the last 30 years?
Yes, absolutely they would. That's a great example.
Giants?
Yeah, maybe the Dolphins would have been in the playoffs. They would have liked to get in full.
once
Yeah,
in a
once
blue
in a blue
moon,
moon.
like one win, please.
But what made me think of that is that do you want to be the official that is calling a game with Patrick Mahomes and that he gets knocked out of and you miss that call? They don't want to be that guy.
The price of doing business.
Right.
You're an NFL referee.
Right.
You're at the top of your game.
Right.
Stuff's going to happen.
Right.
You're going to be a major league umpire. You may have a perfect game. You may get a no-hitter, but the likelihood is that you're going to get a missed call that could cost a game.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you get books and movies made of it. Like the umpire who lost Galarraga's perfect game.
Yep.
He was a famous umpire who blew the call. It would have been a perfect game. And they sign stuff together. Yeah. It's like Bill Buckner and Mookie Wilson.
Right.
When they were signing stuff, would sign the picture of themselves.
Yep.
You can sometimes be in history.
Yep. Do you know Robin Ventura will not sign a picture of him getting punched by Nolan Ryan?
So he should.
He absolutely should.
Because he
but
would make some money.
Maybe he's just waiting. Because the longer he goes without signing,
no one's going to
die.
die.
Well, that is true.
You don't want to wait too much longer.
That is true.
He did get his ass kicked.
Oh, my
by
gosh.
Nolan
He got
Ryan.
worked over, yeah.
If you were a commissioner in the NFL, there are a lot of issues with the NFL that are being worked on. And obviously, you're a perfect person to ask this. What is the first thing that you would do as commissioner of the NFL? What's the first change you would make?
I think the sport's in a great spot right now. Clearly, they're printing money. I'll tell you one thing I would stop doing. I'm curious to know what you think of this because you were probably involved in a lot of the conversations to make baseball a global sport. I think they should stop. In fact, Roger Goodell yesterday, a couple weeks ago, he said he wants to eventually have a franchise internationally. London's probably his preference. Then the next step would be letting them host a Super Bowl.
Are you against that?
I am.
It's definitely going to happen.
See,
You
but
better
why?
start wrapping your arms
Why?
around that.
Because
what's the difference
I feel-
between London and New Orleans?
A 6-hour plane. How long
Depends
does it
where you're
take?
coming from.
That is true.
So what-
But what? So in
Seattle
all,
is further from Miami
Yes.
than London from New
But
York.
what about for the fans? What about for the fans that will want to travel and see their team play in the Super Bowl? You're basically screwing them over. What about
Because you can't get cheap plane tickets to London? Do you know how expensive it is to stay in New Orleans for that last Super Bowl?
So the reason
you couldn't
I
find
hate it-
rooms.
the
what
reason
are we
I
talking
hate it-
about here, Do
you ever feel like soccer is shoved down our throat here in America? Like, oh, this is the biggest, most popular sport in the world. Like, how come you guys don't love it? How come you guys don't like it? It's just not American. I wonder if people across the globe feel like, why are they trying to shove football down our throat?
Well, they don't love American football across
No.
the globe.
Right.
I mean, it's try as we may, they don't love the NBA
That's
or
why I'm-
baseball
right.
the way that we all want them to. You know, Yao Ming comes and all of a sudden China's into basketball. I totally understand that. You're cheering for a person, not a sport. I would tell you that the reason why international matters to leagues, it's the same reason why the West mattered to the settlers, because you got to find new space at some point.
Right.
You have to find new avenues of revenue, and that's what international is for leagues. Mm-hmm. So that's not stopping.
That's not stopping.
I'm sorry
All right,
to
do
tell
you want
you.
my most anti-player make the NFL the best product in the world?
Bring it.
You do away with guaranteed contracts. You
NFL doesn't do well. Doesn't
you-
have a lot of guaranteed contracts.
incentive-based contracts.
Would you do that in the NBA and MLB too?
Absolutely.
And what are the incentives in football? Catches?
Well,
Yards
from the,
after catch?
Yeah, touchdowns.
Touchdowns?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if you're an offensive lineman?
You can have grades that could do it.
Who's grading?
Well, that's a great.
Is it war?
then
Like,
you'd
what
have
is-
to
what are
be-
we doing here?
You'd have to be. But the point being, I do think guaranteed contracts have really hurt American sports. NBA is a great example. And I'm sure you've seen them. I think it's hurt baseball, where you've seen guys, once they get that big payday, they are set.
Are you
and they
day-to-day
start
in media?
coasting. What's that?
Do you have a guaranteed deal? in any of your media? Do you have a year contract anywhere? Or
Yeah.
Are you show to show?
No.
Does it hurt the job that you do because you know that I got 11 months left on my deal. I can mail it in on a random Tuesday.
I have.
Do you ever do
I
that?
do yearly deals because I do like to bet on myself. But I think it would be human nature if I got a 10-year deal to maybe not put as much preparation in, wouldn't you? You don't think it's being an ultimately very honest situation?
I had
You don't think you would
long-term
be
deals as a
tempted?
president, and I worked just as hard when I had 4 years left as when I had 1 year left. With nothing personal, I'm a month from being a free agent, and I work just as hard today as I do when I'm in the middle, starting a 2 or 3 year deal. I would give players a bigger benefit of the doubt. The reason why I would allow guaranteed contracts, I want short-term deals.
Right.
I want free agency every year. I love what college is doing, and I want the pros to do it. And we asked the players for free agency every year, and they said no.
Right.
And the reason they don't want it is they do want to get paid not based on future performance.
Right.
They want to get paid based on past performance.
Right. And they want paid to have some guarantee in case they get hurt. That's the thing, that they want some stability in case they have a career-ending injury.
But don't you have the same issue in media? It's not a physical injury, but if you say the wrong word, you're canceled the same way as if you break your ACL while playing.
Yeah.
So I agree it's a physical injury in sports, but I never understood the whole I can't do my job because I'm hurt thing. There's plenty of jobs. You can't be a fireman with a torn ACL.
Right.
And there are things that happen that cause people to get injured all the
They
time.
would get workers' comp, wouldn't they?
So you get that in football.
Yes, that's true.
So what do you...
But is it the same significance? Would it be as much?
I would argue it's more significant for non-athletes
Right.
to
Yes,
get that benefit
100%.
because they're not getting the base that
Yes.
athletes are getting.
I think the NFL's in a really good spot. Because I'm just throwing stuff against the wall with you. Like, if you were trying to fix it, I know there's a lot of things that are broken.
Would you fix the CFP?
Yes, absolutely. Now
All
we
right.
can talk.
All right, what would
Now
you
we
do
can
there?
talk. I would do away. So the college football playoff had several problems this first year. I would make it larger. I would probably go 16 teams as opposed to 12.
No buys?
No buys. I would also do away with the automatic seeding, which was really dumb. The fact that you had, and no offense to Boise State, they're a different level of football, and yet they had a 3 seed ahead of programs like Penn State that play in the Big Ten that play a much different schedule.
They didn't win.
That's true.
So it all worked out in the end, didn't it?
That is true. They did.
Generally
but,
does.
Yes. But a team like Oregon, who was the best team in the country in the regular season by far, did not get beat, won the Big Ten. The way the bracket worked, they had one of the toughest brackets and eventually got beat because they had to face Ohio State in their first game as opposed to potentially playing them in the national championship game.
And what's wrong with that? You want the best team to win the national championship every year?
I do,
Did
but
the
I
best
also,
team in the NFL win the Super Bowl every year?
No, I don't think the best team wins in any sport with
Right.
a playoff. But I do think you should. So I want to keep the regular season special where it does matter because I think in other sports it doesn't.
You're right.
So I want to keep it where it means something so that there is an incentive. All right, you're the number 1 seed. You should have the most favorable bracket to get you to the national championship. And I think they failed in doing that. I think it was well
So you would
intentioned.
do reseeding.
Yes, I would do reseeding, and
Okay.
I would go to 16 teams. I would also. Are you aware there are 2 separate private equity firms that have on the table suggestions of how to totally revamp college football? Which I actually look at them, and I'm like, these are genius.
Well, it's going to be for profit.
Yes,
If
absolutely.
a VC firm puts money in, they're going to want a return on their investment.
Absolutely.
And you're going to need profitable programs, which means you're going to have programs that are closed
Yes.
that are not profitable.
So the proposals, there's 2 of them, 2 competing firms that are out there. 70-team league. One has 60, one has 70. They're both similar, but you would go with regional conferences. So I mean, this is such a out there against the wall that would never happen idea,
Not in our
but I
lifetime.
kind of love it because it makes no sense for Stanford and Cal to be in the ACC. Like, you talk about fans. Like, what about those fans that Stanford wants to watch them play against Florida State? Like, good luck. You know how
a
expensive
lot of
it is to
flying.
get to Tallahassee? Exactly. It's a lot. So you read.
From New York, too, by the way, so.
Exactly. From anywhere. But Tallahassee's even more expensive. Going into a regional airport, it's brutal. But going from there, and then you know what else is a part of this 70-team proposal, which has, I think there's 10 divisions. 10 divisions. Maybe there's 72, whatever the numbers come out so that they're evenly matched. But they would be regional based. They would all advance in the playoffs. But the most important thing, they have a secondary 60-team league, and they would have promotion relegation.
Relegation?
Yeah. which I think would be great.
We talked about relegation and trying to see if we could do that in other sports other than soccer. And there's too much money at stake, too much TV money that relegation doesn't work.
Right.
It's the same in the conferences. Can you imagine being relegated out of a conference where your budget assumes that you're getting a percentage in the next year? Florida State, in theory, would be relegated after their last season.
Right. And they're already
There's no way
hurting
you're in
for
favor
money.
of that.
But I would be in favor for it if it was the sport. Like if it was agreed upon by everybody, I would be all for it. I think it would make that because I'm not a soccer guy. But you think about the implications of what a Florida State versus Florida game, which really didn't mean anything. It's a couple of bad teams playing. What if Florida, who was playing the last game of the season, is playing Florida State, their rival, and they could beat them and send them to a situation where financially it crushes them and they have to earn their way back? Like, I think those type of storylines across college football would make a sport that's already rabid insane.
Can you imagine if that's what the future is? That it would be Gladiator. Every single
Give
game.
me all of it.
Danny Kanell. We're already done. I would do this for way longer. It's really good to see you.
You
Thanks
too.
for coming on. We'll do it again.
You got it.